Hey Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
I am so excited for you to be here today. My first question is to kick it back to my guests and let them do a quick introduction of who they are and what they do.
Well, my name is Jennifer Longmore, and I have been in business now for 20 years full time. I have the number one Akashic Record training school. And I say that because we've trained, well over probably hundreds of thousands of people at this point. But that's not everything, right? We have a global company. I love what I do. I'm on a mission to really make sure as many light workers and conscious CEOs are as resourced as possible, including financially resourced, because we've got a lot of work to do. And we've got a lot of just a lot of stuff going on our ascension journey, right? And it's not that money's the be all and end all, but it really is. If we're elevating consciousness, we can't bypass prosperity consciousness, right? It's incongruent. And so that is a big piece of what I help people do that are awake and aware to have this as a tool that really helps accelerate the stuff that they're coded to do in this lifetime to really bring it to life pretty quickly. So, yeah.
The second question, I always want to understand my guest's journey through their life with religion or spirituality or nothing at all, and sort of like where did they start? What's that origin story in their family unit? And then where did they end up as an adult? You have a very fascinating story, so I just want you to tell the audience all the things. Don't leave out any details.
Okay.
So for you, what was
Well,
that journey?
I had diaper rash when I was sick. No, I'm kidding. So my dad is intuitive, but he wouldn't necessarily tell you that, but he knows that he knows. My mom's very intuitive. Her dad was a psychic medium with the police. And so they loved treating me like a little toy. And when I was 3, I used to tell them like, so and so called and this happened. And then 15 minutes later, the phone would ring and it would be so and so. You know, and then my grandfather started sending me Oversoul Speaks and like all these Jane Roberts books and stuff when I was 7. Like even now to read those, they make you cross-eyed, right? And I was like, what is happening? But we went for a past life regression when I was 4, and we were there for the whole day. And so each of us had our own past life regression, and then my parents had one together, and then we had one as a family. And so while the majority of the day was actually focused on them, and so I went to this pool, and all these adults would swim up to me, and they'd be like, "Hello, little girl. What do you think the meaning of the universe is?" And I'd be like, "Well, right." And I guess I would just channel. And they all started swimming up to me and doing whatever. So I didn't understand what I had. I just knew that it was something that, yeah, I didn't know what to make of it until I went out in the world. I didn't know it was an issue. And then I went to school and I was making my teachers uncomfortable, my friends uncomfortable. So I stopped really speaking a lot. I started really holding myself back. I started fawning a lot because for those of us that are healers, we don't want to hurt people. And I was clearly making people uncomfortable and I had no idea why. On top of the fact that, typically when we're intuitive, we also have other gifts. So we maybe pick up things more quickly at school. And so I was a good student and then I knew things and I couldn't explain why I knew them. And then if I was going to learn a sport, I sucked at a lot, don't get me wrong. But if I was going to learn a sport that I was good at, I picked it up pretty quickly. So I had to start really downplaying. I had to start slowing down the speed in which I handed in tests or, purposely get things wrong when the teacher would call on me so that my friends wouldn't completely alienate me. But I remember being 10 months old and seeing a lot of orbs in my crib. When I was 3, I remember being very telekinetic and moving a lot of energy in my room and doing a lot of shape shifting and stuff. And again, had no words for it. So I didn't tell anyone about it because I was actually afraid of it. I should say I was afraid of it, but I didn't even know how to articulate what was happening. And I didn't have the life experience or the comprehension or the language skills, right? I just knew that I knew. And then I was really mad at God for a long time. I say God, but universe, source, whatever. And then in my late teens, I thought, well, no amount of me being mad at this or trying to push it away is making it go away. So I might as well just lean into it. And that's when I started, getting into astrology and numerology and just finding language for stuff that I was already into. And at the time, my mom gave me, I remember being 17 and she gave me Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Life. I since actually don't like that book at all, and I'll explain why if you would like. But I really think it's part of the distortion and part of the purposeful infiltration in our consciousness community to distort and to keep certain programs running, right? I understand that there could be value to that, but anyways, that was the journey back then. And then I went to university to train in forensic social work, and poof, manifested a car accident because I was ridiculous and I had way more courses than I needed to have. I had 2.5 full-time jobs. I had a more than full-time case or study. And my car spun out of control, which was pretty metaphoric for my life. I got into Reiki. I had someone did some Reiki on me. And next thing I know, I'm going for my Reiki mastery. And so when I graduated, I was working in obviously very intense situations. I was investigating cults and ritualistic abuse. And I won't get into the whole story of that because I don't want to create a lot of trauma for people. But I was thrown into the deep end very quickly. And here I am, very intuitive, and I'm now super sensitive to energy. And I'm a Reiki master by this point, right? And so my vibration is way higher than really my coworkers. Frankly, they were oftentimes more toxic than the clients. And but then I'm going out in all these intense situations. So the amount of energy I had to expend to almost bring my vibration down to be able to have vibrational resonance, right? In those workplaces, it was actually a lot of work. I got really sick, adrenal fatigue. But additionally, I woke up one day and I was like, oh my God, I'm living just above or just below the line, meaning I would have just enough to pay my bills at the end of every month or not quite enough. And I thought, if this is how things are now, how am I going to sustain this for 40 years? I'm living for the weekend.
Yeah.
I'm working 18-hour days. I'm tired. I'm sick. I'm burned out. The alarm goes off on Monday and all I want to do is cry because I have to, I never really rested. On top of that, I could never really take vacation. It was actually, I would pay a higher price to take vacation than I would to just keep plugging through. But I thought, this is not sustainable. There's got to be a better way. And so I ended up leaving there and I went into a corporate investigative position. And that was not a good fit for me. And so the universe really kind of forced me to start a business. It was like, okay, you need to do this. There's no job for what you do. You're going to have to create a business. And at some point, you're just going to have to take the leap and trust the net will catch you. And so that was 20 years ago, which is hard to imagine. I feel like it's been about 8 to 10 years, but it's actually been 20 years that I've been doing this full time. So wild.
That is wild. Well, and just to think about that evolution of all of that, when it seems like now is there's such a boom in the work that you're doing that everyone is starting to do, right? That you sort of also had a head start there. It just seems like really synchronistic and interesting to me in terms of I really wanted to unpack your forensic social work a little bit more because I do feel like when I was reading about it, it feels like a metaphor for what happens to us sometimes on the spiritual experience when we break out of our domestication and the world opens up and there's so much more and you can't go backwards. I think that's is kind of what you were trying to explain. You can dim down, you can vibrate down, all of these things, but to a point, and then it's you just can't. And so I was wondering when you were going through that experience specifically, how were you being able to reconcile also just the darkness of humanity that you were witnessing, especially in children? Children are so innocent. I grew up in foster care and in social work myself for my first 5 years. Clearly, then when you are in the social work system, that you are absolutely last. I learned that very early on, when, and have healed it since, but that area of life is just so dark and heavy. But how did you reconcile that? And what advice do you have for people trying to break that domestication fully and saying I'm not going back there, I'm just going to go forward?
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I feel for you. And if I had have been your caseworker, I would have been such a honey badger for you. I say that jokingly, but I really was a strong advocate for kids, and I I was passionate about it, and I didn't realize how passionate I was about protecting kids until I was in it. And it, even if we want to look at cognitive dissonance, and I know you get this, having been in the foster care system, nothing's going to clear you of the illusion of cognitive, like nothing's going to treat your cognitive dissonance quicker than going into that system, because all of the programming we had around, you can trust teachers, you can trust priests, you can trust police officers, you can trust politicians, you can trust male children's singers that seem to want to be singing to 3-year-olds for their whole effing life. Like, isn't that alarming to people? And we investigated those. But in the first 4 months of my job, I was now the senior social worker because the turnover was so high. Because the thing is that most people go into that job very wounded, and they can't actually protect you, as an example, because they're so confronted with their own wounds that they don't mean to. They turn it's not that they're turning a blind eye. They're so confronted they can't even look at it in the eyes. So I had workers, once I became a supervisor, I had workers that were faking case notes, saying that they were going out on cases that they weren't. And literally, these are legal documents. They're forging legal documents, saying all kinds of things, right? Excusing behavior, not asking questions, especially a lot of times you're facing angry men. And it was actually the angry men that helped me heal my relationship with my dad, because my dad was a very angry guy. And my choice was avoid angry men because, oh, this reminds me of my dad, or take my intuitive knowing and use it to my advantage to read their energy and read what they needed to hear from me so that I could take them from 10 to 0 so that they could do what I needed them to do, because I was the one in control at 22 years old, by the way, right?
Yeah.
To let them know, actually, no, this is how this is going to go down, right? But most people weren't able to do that. So that's how I use my intuition to work for me, is to read situations very quickly and go, what does this person need to hear so that I can get into this situation or out of the situation safely, and get kids in and out of the situation safely, and have it be an and better outcome, ideally, not always, right? Ideally, so that we get the outcome that we want for everyone. So it was complicated, but that's how I would read the energy. And then I started creating patterns, right? Like, oh, okay, when I use these certain sayings, it seems to de-escalate situations. And sometimes I actually wanted to escalate situations, because some parents didn't care about their kids, and I needed to poke the bear to see if they were actually going to try and challenge me, instead of just literally walking out with kids and then being like, okay, right? Like there was a lot of in between, but I investigated, and I know you get this, I investigated a lot of very high profile people, cults, ritualistic things, a lot of religious institutions, and so on and so on. So at a very, very early on in my career, I learned that the people we were taught to trust most often were not going to have our back, including social workers, right? I had a lot of messed up workers that I worked with that were doing more harm on the job. Not intentionally, but they were doing more harm because they weren't dealing with their own shit, and they weren't they weren't recognizing the role that they were playing, right? And on top of that, nobody knew how to call them out on that. So it was, the intuition was a blessing, but it was also a curse. Keep in mind too, like I might, let's say, go and interview a child, and I know that that child is protecting someone.
Yes.
And I know exactly what questions to ask them so that I can get the truth out of them, even though I know they're working really hard to try and protect their abuser. Because most kids, they love their abuser. They just want the abuse to stop. And they don't want their abuser to get in trouble. And I'm talking about neglect. I'm talking about, all the spectrums of it, right?
Yeah.
And so, and on top of that, they were so used to not being protected. Why would they tell me if they think I'm just going to walk out and I'm not going to do anything either? Because then they still have to go home and deal with the cause and effect of what happens when they quote unquote tattle, right, on whoever the abuser is, or the person that's mistreating them, again, depending on the spectrum. So, but there were times, like I had a case where a guy murdered his wife, and her name was Jennifer. I had the ability to take the baby. She was trying to leave with the baby, and that's why she got murdered. And he's still in jail to this day. Still, like at the time anyways, this child would be an adult now, but he was, psychopaths have nothing better to do in jail than apply for custody of a kid they know they're never going to get, because it at least gets them out of jail for the day. It at least gets them visitors. It at least gives them something to do. They love playing cat and mouse, right? There's all these things. And so point is, I use my intuition, and I very creatively use the law to my advantage. I found some legal loopholes to be able to get the outcome that I wanted, to get the child out of his care, because we all knew he murdered her, but we couldn't find the evidence until we found the evidence, and it took a year and a half.
Wow.
And I'm not going to share the graphic story of the details, but point is, but there were times I would go to court and the judge would be, I don't know what they were smoking. They'd be like, it's a Friday, it's sunny out, it's the weekend, why can't we all get along? You know what? Let's send these children home and let's let them enjoy a nice sunny weekend with their parents. And I'd be like, what is happening? Right? Or I would go to drop kids off at a foster home, and I'd walk in and I would see 8 beds with no sheets and no covers on the pillows and cat shit everywhere. And I knew damn well why they were foster parents, and it wasn't to protect children.
No, it usually is not.
It was to get paid. It was either to get paid, or it was other nefarious things, or both. And I would just be like, and so I would take the kids, and if it meant staying with them until 4 a.m. until we found an appropriate place, that's what we would do. And I would actually get in trouble for that. Right? So the system, as we know, is broken. Point is, in a system that's so laden with crisis and trauma and compound trauma and
generational trauma, systemic trauma, all the things.
Not to mention that there are controllers that infiltrate those systems that purposely use foster homes as a front-facing door, basically, to funnel kids into situations that are not good. And sorry everyone, because you're hearing stuff that you're probably not used to hearing, but I'm trying to keep it light as possible, I should say. But it's a blessing and a curse to be intuitive in a system that is committed to perpetuating trauma and committed to perpetuating abuse. It actually is, by nature of how it's designed, committed to keep the system going.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was interested in even unpacking that question for you, because I think most of us who go on the spiritual journey, we bump up against sort of old paradigm systems, conditioning in our family, and you will feel a fragment of that darkness, that heaviness that you were inundated with in this experience, and then you have to break away, and there's like boundaries that have to be put up, and it's such a hard experience to go through, to say, like, in order for me to elevate, I have to leave all this stuff behind me, and that's painful. So I couldn't imagine like being someone like you and having all of these gifts and then being in the depths of all of that heaviness. Seems like it would have been so hard.
It wasn't easy because I was heart-centered and I really wanted to do right by people. Additionally, in my astrology chart and my human design, I'm really wired to be an advocate for the underdog, so to speak. And so imagine having that be your contract, and you still at times have to let kids down. Exactly. I was sharing this story the other day because I'm still unpacking, because to your point, you end up getting compassion fatigue. It's not that you don't care. It happens to doctors, nurses, police, etc., where you have no choice but to shut your heart down enough in order to survive.
I know.
Because you literally, like, I was 22 and I had a crystal grid treatment with this guy, and he's like, I have never seen someone holding so much of other people's stuff in their heart. Like, I'm concerned for your heart, your actual physical heart. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I was telling a story the other day, and I'm not going to tell it now because I will get a little bit weepy, but it involved a baby, and we got there just in time. When we got the baby to the hospital, the forensic doctor that I worked with took the baby's pulse, and he had less than an hour to live. So we got there just in time. I do think there's also a lot of divine intervention, right, in how this plays out. But yes, for those of us that are on the boots on the ground, so to speak. There are going to be some cases that just stick with you, and you end up, years later, I ran into some workers that I worked with, and they're like, "Oh my God, I've never heard you laugh before." I'm like, "What do you mean? I laugh all the time." They're like, "I never saw you smile or laugh the whole time I work with you." And I'm like, "That's impossible, because I know that I'm the funniest person I know," right? I would think that in my head. But I thought about it. I'm like, they're probably right. I mean, I really genuinely thought I was a happier person than what I was. But it does something to you. It changes you. And what a gift it was, too, for the work that I do now. Because what do? I help people unpack trauma all the time. I know before someone tells me, I know they've been sexually abused because of just how they're experiencing life, how they're experiencing money. I know if they've been neglected. I know if they were raised by a narcissistic parent. I know if they were raised by an addict. I know if they were abandoned. There's just certain patterns that I can see. And so I know how to help people move through that very quickly. So there was a gift in that work, not to mention my own growth and leadership, and nothing's going to force you to come into your power more than when you actually have a lot of power, but you also have to learn how to use your power in a way that serves everyone, right? Weirdly, even though you have a lot of power in that role, if you lead with that and the law doesn't support you, then you're screwed, right? So you have to learn how to know what level of power and sort of assertiveness, or sometimes I'd play the ditzy blonde card, like, "What's happening here?" Right? Like I would do that with judges. I'd be like, "Oh, I don't know, Your Honor." And that might sound bad, but sometimes you have to find a way to use energy. Intuitively, you lean in and go, "Okay, what does this situation require of me in order to create the outcome that I want?" So the outcome was always to make sure kids were safe and well cared for in an ideal world, right? And so if it meant me coming across as stupid in court so that I could keep a kid safe, I didn't care. And I still wouldn't care to this day. In fact, I probably would take more risks. In fact, I know I would take more risks now than I did back then, because I was a kid still, right? I was still in adolescence, essentially, right? Till you're 28. Yeah. But, it has served the work that I do now, because I see patterns very quickly. And then that same training allows me to see patterns in money. And I get to see, it's almost like this forensic unpacking of what are the things that we're doing with money, or what are the things we're doing with our body, or why do we hold ourselves back living our purpose, or why are we energetically in tune, but yet we're still kind of, blocking it, and various things like that. And I will say, regardless of the trauma that we've gone through in life, our growth and our ascension is always going to be on the other side of how safe and supported we feel, right? And so it's inevitable that we have to work on the trauma, wherever that comes from.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there, but thank you for going into that. It's really good. I really wanted to unpack that with you. But we'll pivot to a little bit more light focused work here. But I have had people on the podcast before who do Akashic Records, but I thought since it's been a while, maybe we would just describe what that is, and then get into the work that you've been doing with that as well, and highlight that area.
Yeah, thank you. So I had a dream a long, long time ago that was a relentless dream, and I didn't know what it was. It was this ancient book, huge ancient book, and it had gold leafing and ancient writing on it, and the pages were flipping too fast for me to read it. And after 2 weeks, and I was super tired, and my colleague even commented to me, she's like, "You look really tired." I said, "I have not slept for 2 weeks. I have this recurring dream." And she said, "Well, you're intuitive. Why don't you just ask your guides what this dream's about?" And I laughed so hard, because of course that was the answer, right? But I was so tired I couldn't even see my way through. So that night I went to bed and I said, "Okay, guys, clearly you have something you want to tell me. You're really wanting to get my attention. I need you to be super clear. If you're going to bring this to me while I'm sleeping, I need you to be super clear about what this is. What are you showing me? Please allow me to understand it and remember it when I wake up." So in the middle of the night, I heard, "These are the Akashic Records. You must learn them so that you can teach them." And I didn't even care that it was the Akashic Records. I was just like, "Oh, thank God, now I can sleep." So I cannot make this stuff up. I woke up at 8:30 in the morning and I was super clear. I had no idea what all this meant. I had already been working in the records, but I didn't have words for it. No joke, 9:05 in the morning, I get a call from a man asking to book an Akashic Record reading.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm like, how did you get my number? And what's even happening? Because I had no business at that point. And he said, oh, I got your number from this woman, Karen. Well, Karen was an acquaintance of mine. She owned a crystal store. She didn't even know. But intuitively, because she was very plugged in, she said, give Jennifer a call. And so sure enough, even though I didn't feel equipped, I was very aware that I was equipped, if that makes sense. So I had a reading with him. And then that kind of just, it did something. And then I was doing readings all the time. And then people kept asking me to teach them. And I'm like, I can't teach you. Nobody's given me permission to teach you, right? Like, why I would think that. And people started getting mad at me. They thought I was hoarding it. They thought I was trying to keep them from it. And it really was, in part because I had professional training, right? Like that was my mindset of, oh, I didn't go to school. Nobody gave me a certificate to say I can do this. But I really just didn't, as you know, my whole filter, my whole life was I don't want to do harm to people. And I don't want harm coming to anyone. And I don't know if I can. And then so many people were asking me, I'm like, okay, well, tell me what you want to learn and I'll see if I can put it together. So sure enough, I put together this level 1 training to teach people how to open their own records and to, you know, go really deep into the oversoul and stuff, right? It's a pretty deep system. And then at the end of that class, people were like, when's level 2? I'm like, there is no level 2. They're like, well, you better create one. I thought, well, and so they kept doing it. After level 3, I'm like, guys, I'm not going to keep like creating all these levels. This is going to give you the competency you need to learn how to access your records, which is the record of your soul. We all have one. And it holds in there all of the information about why are we here? Why did we choose the parents we did? Why did I choose the body I did? Why did I get born in the location I did? And everything in between. Why am I having this illness, right? It's going to answer all those questions. And then it's going to show us what our purpose is, what is our area for growth, what did we come here to contribute? What are we here to master? Why are we here during this time? Why are we here during the Great Awakening? How are we meant to contribute to it? And everything in between. And so it's something that we all have access to, but of course there's all kinds of distortions about who's allowed to have access to it and whether it's light, whether it's dark, you know, all the things, right? So,
And it's very old. The system itself is rooted, like, is it pre-Babylonian time? Or I forget when its inception, you know,
yeah,
whenever it was first documented. It's very old. So
it's ancient, yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
So this distortion about like who really has like the, you know, rights to sort of access it, I know is a hot button with a lot of people.
And a lot of people play Enlightenment Olympics, like, oh, the Akashic Records, I'm above the Akashic Records. I'm like, well, it's an infinite document. You're never complete in the records. There's always more information to access. And the more we elevate consciousness, the deeper we can actually go. Right? So really the journey is through the records is to completely release the veil and see it all. If we really wanted to, right? The journey, it's basically like getting a PhD in the universe. You're just never going to be done, right? How I use the records, I mean, I used to get a lot of people coming for readings about what's my purpose, which is the most common question. Where's my soulmate?
Where's my partner?
Where's my soulmate? And where's the money, right? Like those, it doesn't mean people didn't ask other things, but those are the most common questions. And then, but we can, because it's in the same plane of existence as our theta brainwaves, this is why it's really quite transformational, because when we're in that plane of existence, we are clearing our subconscious of any beliefs that are not true, that are causing us to play out certain things in this lifetime. And then we're able to clear those energies and start creating a new reality because we start telling a different story. And we're always aligned, right? Our outer world is just going to show us what we're aligning to. So if I have a program that says that I suck, that I'm unworthy, that I don't belong, then I'm aligning to that in my outer world. My outer world is going to show me that that's what I'm aligning to. Am I choosing to align to that? No, because unconsciously those things are going to play out. So eventually I get tired of that as an example, and I go into the records and I say, how can I feel like I belong? Or how can I whatever? And in doing that, it gets to clear the programs, the distortions, the vows, the parental programming, the whatever is there, to allow me to have a different experience, to allow me to be restored to my divine blueprint, to allow me to be restored to my field of sovereignty, essentially, right? Which means that nothing's being tampered with, I'm intact, essentially, right? And that's really the journey that we're here on right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. And when you think about those three things, like what's my soul purpose, what my where's my romantic partner, and the money, what's the through line for most of for those three things for people? Like, is it because they don't like trust their own inner knowing? And because I feel like we all know, I feel like every time I've ever gone to a psychic, to my natal chart, to a design thing, to the records, like it's never really told me anything I don't already know about myself. So what's that through line? Is there just some general?
The through line is that we're all programmed. We're in a heavily programmed, distorted world. And it programs us to believe that something outside of us or someone outside of us knows better than we do. So the doctors know our bodies better than we know our bodies. Our teachers are more wise than we are. All the various layers of programming, right? And so it separates us from our true knowing. We are so used to having people outside of us tell us that we can have recess, that we have to come in from the playground, that I have to go to a doctor to know what's going on in my body. I have like all the things, right? and I have to get permission from the government to do this thing, or whatever it is. So we come by it honestly. It's so automatic for us to go outside of ourselves for information that yes, you're exactly right. Most people will say to me, "Oh, I had a feeling," or "Oh, that feels true." Or even if they don't consciously know it, I always get people to tune in so that they know.
Right.
They feel it in their body. They're like, "Oh yeah, this feels true."
Yeah.
So that it can be cathartic for people, right?
Yes.
I don't do readings anymore. I mean, if I'm working with people one-on-one, then that's a little bit different, but I don't actually promote readings because I've been doing it for so long. It's just something I've kind of evolved out of, right? But now when I do readings,
taught half the world to do it, so you've got lots of people you can refer to other people to.
Yeah, and I only share that because I know when we're doing things like this, people are like, "Oh, I want a reading," and I don't like to mislead people and have them think that that's going to happen. But when I'm working with my VIP clients in a 12-month container or whatever, naturally I'm just in the records because it just is. But at this stage now, it's more about collapsing timelines. We do a lot of that in the records so that we don't have a multitude of timelines running. We just collapse it. We learn how to bend, like we're working with ancient energies at this point. I like to be in the very ascended part of the records now where we're bending time, where we're accessing our telekinetic abilities. We're really amping up our telepathy, and we're bilocating, and we're doing all this very sort of woo stuff. We're doing life between life reviews. We're accessing ascension codes. We're connecting in with our future self that's already created something and then bringing her into ourselves now, as an example, right? And then on top of that, you can imagine my frustration when I'm really passionate about the underdog, only to find out that I was not here during 2020 to be going to protests or to be getting involved. My guides kept saying, and even my astrology chart verified this, that I'm here to be the bridge into the new earth. I'm not here at all to be focusing on the old world, which is weird because I saw what was happening as the old world was collapsing, as we all did, right? And seeing the impact it was having on people and seeing how complex all those layers were, because we were all experiencing it differently depending on our race and our religion and our gender and our,
our place
socioeconomic.
On Earth.
Yeah. You get what I'm saying? So it was, my role is to help people navigate the paradox of being in two worlds right now, and then really anchoring new energies into where we're going, right? So bringing through the codes, bringing through the New Earth Prosperity codes, bringing through the Ascension codes, and really clearing distortions very quickly so that we're moving through the illusion so people can see really clearly, really clearly, and understand how the world works so that they can outcreate it, right? My whole thing is about, let's not live in the polarity of it's right or wrong or it's this or that. Let's just rise above it and outcreate what's going on, because we are such powerful co-creators that it's really, that's one of the many things we're here to master is bringing the field of imagination through us and then physically creating it in the field of possibilities.
Well, let's talk about the money thing because I know this is always such a big question with everybody. I want to kind of understand in your terms for money, like what do you define it as, whether that's energetic and how do you see it being as a tool or, sometimes an obstacle for people like in the work that you're doing. Maybe you can give us a few examples of like the obstacles that people see, how you're breaking through those with people, and then kind of what is possible when we sort of suspend our reality and recognize that it's also a construct. It's money is a construct that we've all agreed to. It's a social construct. And
Mm-hmm.
so therefore there is some limitless possibility in there. And how are you sort of teaching that to people?
Mm. Yeah. How much time do we? I'm kidding. It's a big energy. So if we just take the more, I'll say, spiritual approach, it is consciousness, just like our body's
Hmm.
consciousness, just like the chairs we're sitting on our consciousness, and so on. And because we have agreed to it in the collective, it does hold a collective imprint, and then it holds imprints from other spaces and times. We're projecting parental patterning onto it, societal patterning, all the things, right? So it's actually just a neutral energy, but it's become really convoluted because there's so many layers onto it. And so my thing is that money actually is a portal to help us shift the things that are already asking to be healed. It's the invitation. If we lean into it, we can really unpack all of the unconscious stuff that we don't even know is on there. We haven't done anything wrong. We come by it honestly.
Hmm.
And to live in this world, we do have to be in relationship with money, and that's the conundrum, right? Because
Yes.
we recognize, we can feel the texture of the not so light energy, I'll call it, in the money, and we don't know how to use this tool as light workers when we're aware of who created it and kind of how it actually serves to oppress. Like it can be a contribution to us, but it can also serve, our use of it also hurts people too. I don't
Hmm.
mean that we're trying to hurt people, but there's so much tied into it, right? That it's
Hmm.
complex. And so there's no right or wrong answer around it. If we elevate into the meta level and look at it as energy and it's consciousness and it's just neutral and it's here to serve us and support us, just like our body is. Our body is our tour guide here, right? But for our body, we wouldn't be human. And so we also have to honor that the body has its own contracts and that sometimes our body's going to give us messages because it wants to go certain places or have certain experiences,
Hmm.
right? We're literally in a soul contract with the person that is the body, so to speak. And so the same is true with money. But money is, in my opinion, the best healer, frankly. Like people can use their body or they can use relationships, and there's nothing wrong with that. Money kind of affects everyone. It doesn't even matter. I have clients that are very wealthy that were born into some really crazy situations, and their
Hmm.
parents are just nasty when it comes to money and the way they
Hmm.
control them and the way that money has become love and stuff. And I have people that are trust fund babies of some families that are really well known for being really nasty to humans on this planet, doing some really, really nasty things.
Hmm.
And all they know is the trust fund, but they feel guilty circulating money and they feel guilty receiving money, being in service, doing what you and I do,
Hmm.
because they know they have a pretty decent sense of how they're even receiving that money in the first place, if you get what I'm
Hmm.
saying, right?
Hmm.
So there's a huge spectrum of how we all
Yeah.
experience money. And in an ideal world, we would get to a place where it's neutral. And we would get to a place where just like a chair is a tool that supports us as we sit, or money is a tool that supports us to put gas
Hmm.
in our vehicles so that we can go and lead the workshop that's going to help people heal or, whatever. That it's not perfect, but we can be in we can be present to all of the variables surrounded by
Hmm.
money, just like we were talking about the forensic stuff, right? We can be
Yeah.
present to it all. And then knowing it's an imperfect system, how are we going to use it then to be in support of our mission, right? Money
Yeah.
allows me to hire, it allows me to create jobs. It allows me to hire people to give me back my time so I can stay in my zone of genius, not in my zone of competence. It allows me to, like in a little bit, I'm going to be hosting a retreat in Sedona. It allows me to send money in advance and book the things that I need to do so people can have the experience that they're going to have with me, things like that. And it allows me to invest in my health, to be a pristine vessel for channeling, right? It allows me to invest in myself so I can become a better version of me, so that I bring a better version of me to my clients, and so on and so on and so on, right? It allows me, you get it when you host a podcast. People don't realize this, but there's a certain amount of money that's spent to produce it and to, you know, to make sure it's published and stuff.
And sometimes your microphone doesn't work that we had earlier too.
Exactly. And the money that, you know, supports the hosting of the website so people can find us, and the money that we pay for transactions through PayPal, because, you know, people get mad about those fees. It's like, well, that's just the price of doing business, and you're still having an energy exchange with people, right? So, but
I'm
money,
hearing also too that it's like that money is really also like a medium for service too. Like, and I'm not meaning like goods and services, but like a literal like us to live into the service of what we've come to do here, to be of service to the world. And it's sort of like this medium that allows us to do those things, because I really feel what you said back there about how a lot of us get caught up in this, just like the ickiness of what money has become as a condition here in the world, or like an agreed upon thing. And so I think when you transition into more spiritual work that isn't, I would say, in the traditional form of work, like a corporation or whatever, there's so much baggage around that, and baggage around like, how do I make a living if I don't have a degree and a certification and like credentials and like references. And so then you add all of that on top of the ickiness we feel about money. And I think that causes so much like disconnect in people, where it's like, we can let those things go and we can see, like, to your point, it's a tool and we can use it in various different ways.
Yeah, and it's not lost on me that back when I went to university, I was already going to be more likely to be accepted into university than someone that had a different color of skin than I did, as an example. And I'm afforded different opportunities, even though I don't even use my university degree. That degree allowed me to have the experiences that allows me to do the work that I do now and do it well, right? As we talked about before, with my understanding of trauma and so on. And then because of the, I'll say, street cred that I was able to create through the jobs and the connections and the relationships and stuff, it just does open more doors for me. So it is very complicated. I get to the degree that I can get it, because I'm also going to be blind to a lot of things too, right? To the degree that I get it, I'm aware that money, and even though I grew up in a very lower class family, even just me being white allowed me to go into spaces and have experiences that already allowed me to make more money than people that didn't have the same color of skin as I did, as an example. And then going to a university that was really run by a bunch of white men. Like my boss at the time, because I worked in the sexual harassment office, actually, and my boss was identified as a lesbian, and she was in a partnership. Of course, back then she couldn't get married. They went and they had, there was a gay couple that they approached to be sperm donors. And so like, this was very out there back then. It wasn't to me, but to the world, right? That was, to the world, a big deal. And so it's interesting to see even how to think of what she had to put up with these white men that would splain her and talk over her and stuff, like, just painful. And she was so graceful about it. And yet she also, I learned a lot from them actually about how to outcreate situations that weren't supportive of the outcome that you wanted to have, right? I'm sure, because we spoke about it, that she would have preferred not to have to do the dances that she had to do to get the things that she wanted to get, right? And that was, and I'm sure that still happens, by the way, in universities to this day, because even now I get ads in Facebook and I'm like, holy cow, are we ever gonna like are we ever going to see like transition in universities or colleges or whatever, right? So, but all of that to say that, yeah, money it's very complex. And yet everyone's asking about it, right? In their records and beyond. Like you can put anything on social media that has something to do with helping people make more money, and that will be the most engaged post that you get because
Yeah.
we need a lot of things, but that is something that allows us to function the way that we need to function. But money is allowing me to create my animal sanctuaries, right? It's allowing me to invest in myself and stay healthy and be a really pristine channel, right? And be an impeccable steward of my body, of my consciousness, of my business, etc., so that I can really show up and bring my A game all the time. It's allowing me to live my purpose. It's allowing me to be a model. It's allowing me to learn more about it so that I can pass that wisdom on to other people so that they can get out of the muck and so that we can elevate the amount of people, especially light workers. We're the ones that are going to change the world. We're the ones that are here to elevate consciousness. We need to be fully resourced, and being fully resourced also includes having more money.
And doing it in a very dense consciousness that still exists in a lot of spaces and places. I think the luxury I feel like I have going down this path and having this podcast is I get to dip into like your energy, everybody else's energy that's very, above what the density is of like the normal conditioning that happens, but we still have to be in that world and sort of toggle between those places. But it's beautiful to have to be in this space with you and other people. But it's interesting how we all have that. It seems like a lot of people have that struggle with the money and all of the different degrees in which it's tripping them up in their life, and especially with the light workers. But we need it. Like you said, we need it to.
And I still get triggered by money. It's a journey, right? It's not about, do I have a money story? It's about how healthy is my money story. So in an ideal world, we're just extracting ourselves from all of the distortions that don't allow us to have the relationship that we want to have with it in service to us. We're so used to serving money, by the way. We're so used to punching a clock, as an example, or being in the program of I have to work hard in order to be allowed to have it, things like that. That if we really get restored to the truth of money, money's here to serve us. Both time and money are here to be our servants. And yet we are so heavily programmed to be in service to them. And that's one of the things that we're liberating, right? So that we can be present, we can be free. But even look at what's been happening in the world over the last few years. Like you can imagine those of us that are awake are having a pretty hard time paying taxes, knowing that a portion of our taxes go to the police, and maybe we have some perception of the police and we're not so happy that our money's going there anymore. Or
gotcha.
On and on and on. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes. Sorry.
And I mean, most people don't want to pay taxes. I just kind of view it as it's a cost of doing business, and it is a contribution, right? It circulates, and it is what it is. There's so many layers. There's at least 10 different relationship layers on money that we have to unpack. And then we have our primary cast of characters, I call them, which is our parents. And they're always going to be the gift that keeps on giving, right? There's always going to be another layer there of, there's my dad's energy on there, or whoever was the male figure, right? That might have been in our life, or the absence of the male figure in our life. And then same with the female figure, and so on and so on.
Yeah, I work with women mostly. I'm very passionate about working with women from a financial perspective. So I have this financial flow class that I work with women, and I just had a girl this week. My first question is always like, what was your first relationship with money? Like who in your family impacted you the most with money? And she said, like my dad held all the money. He gave my mom an allowance, and then he held money over me. And so I've always felt like I didn't know money because I was never taught about money. And so she had made this whole story about how she's not good with money and how she doesn't know how to manage it, and like all of these old stories that, again, like you said, there's multiple layers. And it wasn't just that one, but it's a lot of things that really cloud our judgment about our ability to work with money and other things, not just money. But and we'll kind of leave it here because we're almost getting to the end here, and I want to ask you just a couple more questions. But the money piece, I definitely wanted to hit home with you because I think you're doing a really interesting and important work in that space as well. So I wondered if we, attacking all of that together, I wondered if you, if we could just talk about like, what are you feeling, um, 5, 10 years into our human time frame space about what's happening with us with our great awakening and the shifts and unity consciousness and oneness that is really reverberating through all of our communities and taking shape and form in really interesting ways. What do you see happening in these next, decade or so? What are you excited about?
What am I excited about? I'm excited to, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we are in the journey. The energies, the universal laws are creating the ascension, whether we can keep resisting it or we can just lean into it and know that this is why we're here. I'm actually excited to see how we restore the truth of, let's say, our animal kingdom and our waters and various things, right? Because as we're healing our hearts, as we're healing consciousness, it ripples into all consciousness. So I'm excited to see how humanity rises out of this, because it's crunchy right now, right? And for some people, what happened in 2020 and beyond still hasn't been enough to light a flame under their butt to really do their thing. I had people that had been talking to me for 10 plus years about, one day, someday I'm going to start a business. And they came to me in 2020. Okay, now I'm going to start a business. And I'm like, okay, awesome. So what are you going to do? Right. And they still haven't, because there's nothing motivating them in us. And I don't need people to start a business. It's just that tends to be a great way to package up our purpose, right? And share it with other people. It's not the only way to be a contribution. But I'm excited to see how we evolve as humanity. As much as we might be seeing things that we're not so happy with, this is all in service to us. It's all in service to us. We came here during this time because this was the time that was going to help us evolve in the ways that we needed to for our soul and then for the collective as well. And so I see us actually, I see more people being aligned with their purpose. I think I see more people than ever doing what they want to do for a living and being compensated for it, instead of being in a cubicle if that's no longer serving them, or, wherever they might be feeling stifled. I see a lot of healing happening. Actually, it's because ascension is all about releasing the density. The programs are the density, the hooks, the cords, the oaths, the allegiances, the parental programming, the religious programming, the whatever programming, are all dense energies. And so we're going to be fully expressed. We're going to be living our truth, not filtering, not fawning, not freezing, not, I hope I'm okay, I hope I belong. We're going to be restored to the truth of who we really be, which is that we're already worthy and deserving. We already belong. We're allowed to take up space. We're allowed to create just because we can. We're allowed to be just because we can. And we're already seeing that, right? More and more people don't want to work. They recognize they need the money, so that's the conundrum. But people are already feeling the shift of, I don't want to hustle anymore. I don't want to be part of the grind. I don't want to be spending money just because I'm being told that I'm not a complete human unless I have shoes that are red on the bottom of them. Like all the constructs that are out there. So that's the nutshell of how I see this playing out, for sure. But it's not going to be perfect, of course.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of us that need to awaken. And even though a lot of us are evolving in real time, it feels like there is so much more work to do, and why it's so important for us to lean into it when we can, so we can elevate it. And I do feel like, and I'm sure you do as well, it's like, this energy, like the more conscious energy you're around, like the higher you get. And, it's important to put ourselves in those spaces so we can also awaken more deeply. I feel like sometimes even on my journey, as much as I've learned and grown and evolved, there's still so much more for me to uncover and understand, and things I just don't know yet. It's just really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's kind of the fun. I will say, for me, what's been fun about this journey is that I think we go through life based on our programming, always trying to find answers. What's my purpose? Where's my soulmate? Where's the money? Like, we're constantly looking for answers. And now I'm in a place where I'm actually happy that I know almost nothing. Yeah. I actually prefer to live in the question and live in the energy of curiosity, and let life show me what's next, as
I
opposed
love that.
to being in a seeking of answers. I'm weirdly comfortable knowing nothing.
I love that. Yeah. And curiosity, I feel like, is a spiritual practice in and of itself. It's just such a beautiful place to sit in general. But I love that. Well, I'm going to leave the questions there. I did want to highlight the fact that you've got podcasts and maybe give you some space to talk about that a little bit. And then anything that you've got going on that you want the audience to know about, programs, classes, whatever you've got. We just sort of touch, a little high level on all of those things now.
Well, thank you for that. I think if people, the best way to stay in touch is to go to souljourneys.ca/soul, because you're going to get a gift, which is the 9 most powerful questions to align to your purpose. You'll get more information about the records. You're going to get some questions that help you ascend more and things like that. But then that brings you into our email community, where we send out daily messages from the Akasha. So it's basically like getting messages from the universe, except from the Akashic Records. People love those. I didn't think people would want to hear from me every day, but they do. And that way too, you can stay in the know, because in the fall we have Clear Channel Summit. So I'm bringing together a bunch of clear channels to give their predictions for 2024. And that'll be the best way to find out about it. I'd give you the URL, but I don't even know what it is right now, because we're in the process of creating it. And then, you mentioned I have the 7-figure, we're actually changing the name to the 7-figure frequency show. And on there, it's really about what are the inner and outer shifts that we need to make in order to be able to create 7 figures. It doesn't mean we have to. It's just a lot of people want that as a destination. And they want to know why it's evading them. And we're programmed to believe that it's hard to make your first million, that it means something about you if you want it, or it means something about you if you don't pursue it, and all the things. So basically just untangling people from all the distortions so that we can realize there's no one way to do that. But I do bring on conscious CEOs on there because, well, it would be weird to have people that are very 3D on there, because my audience would just be like, what is happening right now? So, yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I had a wonderful time with you. The audience will probably not be able to see any of the actual technical difficulties we had, but I appreciate you sticking with me through those and letting us go over a little bit of time. My microphone gave up on me. The camera shut off. So thank you for being patient and kind, and just as being generous to just stick it out with me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Listen, I get it. I totally get it. I'm so grateful and honored to be here, actually. It's been amazing, and I'm so glad we got to do this.
Yeah, and I always do like to end the podcast just checking in with you and every guest that comes here, what 3 things they're grateful for. So we end on a super high note at the end.
Ooh. Well, I'm grateful for the mentors that are helping me bring the sanctuary together. I'm grateful for my family, meaning my dog and my son and my husband, which probably sounded bad to say it in that order, but oh well, it is what it is. And I'm grateful for my body, right? But for my body, I wouldn't even be able to be here. So I'm grateful that it moves me through the world and allows me to do this work.
I might put my family in that order too, so don't worry about it.
Hopefully they're not going to listen to this.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming to the show. I had such a wonderful time with you. I really appreciate you.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Xiomara, in alignment with LightCasting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.